Hello everyone, and welcome to our lunchtime lesson on getting ready for life after school with the Compass tool, or taking control of transitions. We also went through a few different names. Welcome to those watching live and also on catch up. Our session today is going to be a conversation all about how parents, carers and professionals can support children and young people with additional support needs to transition into adulthood, and one of the key tools that can help with that process, which is Compass. Now, just some quick housekeeping before we start for those watching live. As I mentioned, hopefully you'll get that automated voice at the beginning that says the session's recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel, and because of that, we just ask that you keep your cameras and microphones off for the session. Now I'll just move forward to introduce myself and Tracey. Beth, if you just want to close, we've got my colleague Beth in the background who'll be providing a wee bit of tech support. So that's just kind of a wee cover of what we'll be talking about today. So my name is Hannah, and I'm a Senior Advice and Information Officer at Enquire. Enquire, hopefully you've heard of us, but we are the Scottish Advice Service for Additional Support for Learning. So we provide advice and information about support in school and children's rights to parents, carers, professionals and young people. We do this through sessions like today, other outreach and webinars we run, which will give you details of how to follow and keep up to date on. And we also have our websites, enquire.org.uk and reach.scot, which is our website for children and young people. We also have our helpline that you can contact via phone, web chat, email or online form. And we'll put some details up about how to do that later at the end of the session. And lastly, we have social media and even a newsletter you can sign up to keep in touch and hear about upcoming events. So we'll cover that at the end of the session. And today we're really grateful to be joined by Tracey Francis from ARC. I'll let Tracey introduce herself first and a little about ARC and Compass.
That's great. Thanks, Hannah. And it's lovely to be here. And, thank you very much for coming along. ARC Scotland, if you haven't heard of us, we're an organisation that brings together people and organisations to try and create positive change, particularly around obviously disabilities and additional support needs. And we believe very strongly that people who have additional support needs and their families are the experts by experience, and perhaps the best way of working out whether services are performing well or where they need to be improved is by listening to the people who are actually receiving those services themselves. So that's very much where we come from. The area of ARC that I work in is the Scottish Transitions Forum, and our focus, we exist basically to improve the smooth transition to adulthood for 14 to 25-year-olds, and it's people with additional support needs of all kinds. So whether you have a diagnosis, whether you don't, whether it's a complex medical condition, whether it's autism, ADHD, also young people who've been through the care system, who've been looked after within the care system, are also come under the category of additional support needs. So we work for smooth transition for that whole population. And I should just say personally, I'm the parent as well of a young woman who's in her 20s now, who's autistic. So I've been through that transition as a parent, as well as in the work that I do with parents and families. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really passionate about. One of the reasons I'm really passionate about trying to make things better for the families who are coming along kind of behind where we were. I want to share our experiences and other people's experiences to make that experience better for others.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, Tracey. And actually, I suppose my personal experience of transitions is I also went through that with being someone who had a lot of additional support at school and medical support. So I also did that transition. So it's an area that I think is really important, and there's a lot of work to do, but I do think there are some improvements, and work like your organisation does it's great to have these sorts of resources now that just weren't available when I remember going through that transition myself. So Well, yeah, so let's just before we get started to explain this session will look a bit different from some of the webinars you might have been to before that we run. We're not doing a presentation or having a kind of Q&A at the end. We're going to focus on hearing from Tracey. But if you do have any questions, you are welcome to pop them in the chat. And if there's something relevant, I'll try and incorporate that as I chat to Tracey. But on that, please don't ask about specific circumstances or kind of mention the names of children or schools or staff. Where possible, we'll try to include some of your ongoing questions. But if you have something more specific and some of the resources that Tracey and I share don't kind of answer those questions, you are very welcome to also give us, get in touch with us on the helpline. Great, so let's get started in a wee bit of hearing about Compass and your work, Tracey. So what I was kind of firstly wanting to ask was, from your work, what do you feel are some of the challenges that young people with additional support needs and their families face around getting ready for leaving school?
I think that, to be honest, it's actually quite a scary landscape out there. I think one of the biggest challenges is not knowing what to expect. And everything seems to happen in a very short space of time. You seem to be being put under pressure to make decisions when maybe you've not really had time to think it through. And perhaps your young person is not ready to take those decisions. I mean, I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do with my life when I was 14, 15. I'm not sure I necessarily still do, but there we go. But it's I think and it feels like everything becomes very pressured at that point, and everything is geared towards, this is what happens when you leave school. What is your next step going to be? Where are you going to go from there? And life is so much bigger than that. Life is very complicated. And I think, for families, for parents and carers, not only do they have the care of a young person who's got an additional support need, and that could involve, I mean, that's going to look different for everybody. It could involve personal care, it could involve, sort of psychological support, whatever it happens to be. But then they're also being asked very often to take on board all of this new information, a lot of responsibility around kind of making decisions and coordinating different professionals. And it's not something that for most parents and carers, you're going through this for the first time. How are you supposed to know what to do, what's coming up, what kind of questions you should be asking? And I think so many people, certainly I had this experience, and I've spoken to so many parents who have, you get through that process and you do come through it. You come out of the other end and, I can tell you that there is good stuff out there, but you come through that and you think, well, if only someone had told me that, 3, 4 years ago, we could have saved ourselves a lot of time, we could have saved a lot of stress, and we could probably have saved quite a lot of pressure on the young person, So I think that was a lot of our thinking was around when we started developing Compass, and I'll be talking mostly about Compass for parents and carers, but I know that there are a couple of other versions as well that I'll touch on. But the idea was that parents and carers were telling us they really wanted to see that overview of what is involved in transitions. What takes place, when does it happen, when do they need to act, who should be doing what, and where can they get information to get that started and get those conversations started. And that was very much, and actually, to be honest, as I say, we were talking about that with parents and carers, but we were hearing from young people as well that they were not being asked the questions that they really needed to be asked so that they could take part in their own transitions in an appropriate way, an informed way. And professionals were coming to us as well and saying, well, actually, the legislation is so complicated, that the landscape there is so complicated. A lot of professionals don't really know the overview that you might imagine that they do. So, Compass is one of the things that we've developed to try and help everybody understand it a little bit better, make sure that they're getting the consistent information, make sure that they're getting individualized information that's relevant to them, and make sure they're getting what they need so that they can take control a little bit more. We say on the I'm sorry, I'm rabbiting now, but on the introduction page to the parent and carers tool, we've got taking control of transitions. It's very much about empowering people to be part of their own process, because this is about their lives. It's not about I use the word process. It's not about a professional process that's being done to people. It's about trying to build a life that your young person is going to be really fulfilled and happy within, and is going to be able to live their best life. And if they are doing that, then you as a parent and carer are living your best life too. So, hopefully this is something that can start changing that narrative and moving it in a different direction.
Absolutely, Tracy. No, you're not rabbiting on at all. I think it's so important and nice to hear, and important and good to hear, those thoughts about where those kind of barriers come up. I was just thinking, for us on the Enquire helpline, that is often that journey of just that slightly information overload and speaking to families who possibly actually things are a bit tricky at school right now. So to actually be thinking, well, how are we going to resolve what's going on now and make sure that works for a young person for the next year or two they have left at school, but then also having this sort of looming over thought of, oh my gosh, we've then got to start thinking about what happens next. And I think that's kind of what I kind of really liked about kind of looking at Compass and kind of the way we kind of package our resources. It is about professionals, parents, carers, and that kind of young person in the middle as well, being like, well, what do we do now and what works? And also trying to, I think Compass does well in sort of talking you through the different parts of it, because often that's, we know from our advice, the actual just the rights around school can feel a bit overwhelming, and that's what we're here for. But you've then got to, you might start to feel you've got a wee bit of a grip over that system, and then you're looking at a whole other system, you as a parent, that young person, and there's so many opportunities and different ways that can go. So yeah, hopefully, I suppose we've kind of gone on to the next question. I'd asked you kind of about the challenges, and my next question was kind of just around how the Compass app can help with these for those different groups, Tracy.
Yeah, I think it's that little bit as well about knowing what it's reasonable to ask of services. I did mention, questions that you wish you'd asked kind of 3-4 years earlier, when you get to the stage that we're at, and you think you could have saved a lot of time that way. And I think sometimes, you don't know quite what questions to ask, because, again, as I said, you're going through this for the first time. You don't really know what services and so on are out there. And one of the challenges, to be honest, is poor communication. I think I can understand it, because it's very easy when you're working in this area all the time to forget what it's like to be going through it without that prior knowledge. But I think, in a way, it's one of the things I would challenge professionals to try and do, is just to communicate that a little bit better. Because then you have a bit of a clearer idea of maybe what you want to explore, perhaps maybe what's relevant to you. And I think sometimes we do hear from parents that they've had conversations with professionals and they've been made to feel that, perhaps they're asking for something that's a bit unreasonable here. Maybe they're asking for the moon. And when they tell you what they're asking for, it's not unreasonable at all. It's actually, in some cases, it's things they're actually entitled to expect. In other cases, it's just a perfectly reasonable question to ask. So I think Compass, one of the things that it can do is maybe take away some of the it can demystify that a little bit. It's got a section that's a jargon buster. So if people are talking and using terms or using abbreviations or things like this that you've not really come across before, you can look that up in the jargon buster, and it will actually tell you, just in very simple language, pretty much what is that about, and it will give you links to more information about that topic or that thing. So you can actually do that outside a meeting. You can do that in your own time, midnight, if that's the time that you sit down and start to actually have a bit of time and energy to do that. And it just means that when you're actually in transition meetings, or if you're talking to professionals, you've just got that little bit more confidence, that you can actually be there and engage in those conversations. And then I think, the pointers around what your entitlements are, what the legislation says you should expect. We do know that there's a gap in legislation and practice. So what people are entitled to is not always what, unfortunately, they're finding that is available. But at least if you know that it's there, then you know that it's reasonable to ask for it. And that gives you quite a lot of power and confidence, I think, when you're actually having conversations. You're not on the back foot. You're actually able to have those conversations in a little bit more of a maybe an informed way, perhaps a constructive way, because you've got that knowledge. And I think also, in some cases, as I said, that the professionals don't always have the knowledge that you expect that they might have. So, if you're using Compass, if you're aware of Compass, if the professional you're talking to isn't, then you can always mention it to them and say, well, actually, this is where you can find, this is where I've got my information. This is where you can find, stuff that might help you as well, around different people's roles and responsibilities. So although the three tools don't talk to each other in the background, every tool, because of privacy and all of that kind of thing, it's very individual. But they do send you to the same information. There's consistency across the board. So that young people are getting information in a format that's appropriate for them. Some of it's easy read. We did try very hard to find resources that were written and created especially for young people. The parent and carer tool and then the professional tool has got links to the other websites and so on around Scotland. It's all Scotland specific. So you know that it's something that's relevant. It's not something that's been written for somewhere else. And at the moment, it is that it's the best that's out there. We know that there are gaps, and this is one thing that we're actually quite pleased about, that Compass is flagging up, because when we went out looking for information, if we couldn't find it, that's an indicator to some of the organizations and services that maybe this is where they could be channeling some resource, to actually create some resources there that speak to parents and carers and speak to young people, because that's obviously a gap in the system. So we've got quite high hopes for this. We've had a lot of positive feedback. It launched in the summer, so we actually launched it in June, and currently there are 900 people who've signed up. That's over, well, how many months is that? I've lost count. Five or 6 months. So that's 900 people who've signed up, who are starting to give us feedback on how they're finding that. And I guess I was a little bit, oh my gosh, it's like sending a child to nursery. I hope people are going to be kind to it. And you publish a book or whatever it happens to be, and as soon as it's published, you realize where the mistakes are. And so we were fully expecting people to come back and say, well, you've missed that, or what about this? And there really has not been very much, and what there has been extremely constructive. So we are going to keep on improving it. We are going to keep on adding to it. But people have found it. They've just gone, why did nobody do this before? Well, actually, one of the young people who co-produced the young person's tool with us, said, this is how transitions should be. This is what we needed. So it has been, all three tools have been co-produced completely with young people and with parents and carers and with professionals. We've developed it over 2 years. We've tested it and piloted it across Scotland. And we know there's a little bit about accessibility. We want to make it more accessible as the months go on, but we're confident that the information in there, it's relevant, it's useful, and people are finding it quite easy to come to grips with in the main. So
that's great. I suppose it sounded that thing to kind of give it a shot, if you're watching this live or as a parent, a catch up, whether you're a professional parent or carer, or you're working with someone, or you think your child or young person might be able to engage with it. I certainly have started talking about it a lot in kind of our work on the helpline. When kind of people add in, they might phone us kind of generally about something else going on, but say, oh gosh, we've also got this transition coming up and I'm worried about it. I tend to say, let's have a look at this tool, whether you want to sit down with your child. We've kind of updated some of our reach pages for young people to show them how to kind of get to the service, and just kind of signing up and giving it a go. And certainly it seems like that, it's a sort of manageable way to look at something that sort of might feel a bit like it's looming in your future or your child's future. Is it a relatively easy sign-up process, Tracey? Do people need to put a lot of information in to start or anything?
We've tried to keep it to a minimum. You do have to create an account in each of the tools to use it. In the young person's tool, they're asked to give you're asked to give a name, and it doesn't have to, I mean, it could be a nickname, it doesn't have to be your own name, but you do need an email address to sign up and create an account. We ask for the birth month and the year. And then in the young person's tool, they're asked to look at things like what the next big change might be, because the young person's tool is very much about helping young people explore what's important to them, and sort of evaluate how much they know, what they need to know, and then share that with people that they trust. The parents tool is a little bit different. You put in a bit more information around the conditions that are having an impact on your young person. But again, it doesn't have to be a diagnosis. It's your view as a parent of, what might actually be having an impact on your young person's life. And then we ask for the local authority area that you're in, but nothing more specific than that. And then school leaving date. So, and if you don't know when that's going to be, then an estimated school leaving date. And all of this information, I should say, it's completely sort of private. It's encrypted. There's no way anyone can attach any of that to the young person or to an individual family. But the reason we ask for that is because we want the tools to give information that's specific. And I think you mentioned there at the very beginning, Hannah, about how overwhelming it can be to get all this information at once. And we don't want to overwhelm people. We want to make sure that they're getting information at the right stage, so that they know what to prioritize and they know what they can maybe leave for later. They can make an informed decision about that. But we also, want to make sure that if they already know about some aspects of the transition, for example, something like guardianship, which some parents have never heard of, but some people, thankfully it's being talked about a lot more now. People might already have that information. So they are asked to put in questions about, do you know about this? How much do you know about it? Do you want to find out a bit more? So you can tailor and shape the information that you're receiving depending on what you already know.
Yeah, so you don't get that information overload. That sounds great, Tracy.
And
I
you
really
can work through it at your own pace. You can work through it at your own pace. That's the other thing.
Yeah, super. I realized time is running. Half an hour comes around very quickly. I was thinking what I might do is combine kind of last two questions that we have, because I think they're quite valuable to talk through. So the two kind of things I wanted to ask Tracy was your thoughts on when is a good time to start planning transition, but also to kind of add into that, if things haven't happened within that kind of ideal world when we want transitions planning to start, what can you do if we are, we sometimes, are talking to families who their young person's due to leave at the, in June of this year, in the year coming, what can they do? So I suppose it's a bit about what's the good time, what would be a good time to start transition planning, and what you can do if that hasn't quite happened and things are feeling a bit in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first one is that in a way, it's almost never too early, because we're going through transitions all the time. What we recommend, what the legislation says, is transition planning should start 12 months before someone leaves school. We know, as I said, it doesn't always happen in practice, but that's what should happen. We recommend that people start thinking about it probably around about the age when your young person's about 14. But that's not the planning, that's the gathering information and finding out, what the options are, and talking to the young person, having those conversations that you need to have. So round about 14 is a good age. If you haven't already started, you can start thinking about it then. But I do know families who, they're ready for information. They're starting to ask questions when their young person enters secondary school. And I think if you're ready for that, and if that's what you want to do, then you should have some information available to you, and Compass, you can go in and use Compass from that age. It will tell you that you're not actually into the transitions planning process yet, but there is information that it can give you. So it's never too early, and to be honest, it's never too late, because even if someone has left school, there's always something else coming up. There's the next stage that they need to be moving on to. So it doesn't stop when someone leaves school. It actually continues on as well. So what was the second bit of the question? Can you remind me?
It was about that, if what families can do if it's later in the day, they're looking at leaving very, in June or something.
Yeah, I think it is never too late. I think it's useful if the schools are doing what they should do around the transition planning process, because then you will have something where people are coming together and you're starting to have a conversation. But we do know that in practice that's actually not happening as it should for a lot of people. And parents, you can start putting your own plan together and having your own conversations with professionals. You don't have to wait for someone to do it for you. You can start that ball rolling yourself. And, one of the things when you've got the information that you need, whether it's through Compass or whether it's through some of the, Enquire or any of the other sources that are out there, that will help you have the conversations and ask the questions that you need to ask. So I think, speak to the professionals who are already involved with you, but if there aren't any, then get out there and try and find that information and get the ball rolling, because there's nothing that says you have to wait and let someone else do it for you. You can take control.
Exactly, Tracy. And that's a lot of what we kind of see on the helpline, families phoning us at this time of year or into January to say, pop an email to whoever is either the guidance teacher or the head of additional support at your child's school and say, can we have a transition planning meeting? And you can then start looking at Compass as well and start that ball rolling. The other thing I'll get Beth to share, but there's a good section on our website as well as Compass on getting ready to leave school and rights, because the other thing we've heard a wee bit about, it tends to be this time of year, is just to know that your young person can stay on for S5, for S6 if they have additional support needs. And sometimes, knowing that your child has that right, it might be that actually an extra year is better. If you're in a position, if there's in a position, it's not that they need to leave at S4 because they have absolutely not, because they have additional support needs. So continuing on, might be another conversation. If they could go on to S5 and S6 and they want to, that could also be another way to give a wee bit of time to that transition conversation. So yeah, starting to ask those questions really helps. Well, that's been a bit of a whirlwind, Tracy, but we've just hit half past 12. Thank you so much to everyone who has joined us today, and to Tracy for taking time to explain what I think is just a really wonderful resource. We really hope this session's been helpful for those that you're watching live or catching up on. We will be sending out a wee survey, just that would be great to get your feedback. I can see Beth shared that there, just so that we can improve, see if these sessions work for you. And we'll also send you a wee follow-up email, which will include contacts for Tracy and for the helpline and for Compass and anything else that's been mentioned. But thank you so much. I don't know, Beth, you just have a moment to share that final screen for us that just sets out everyone's contacts, and you can use, there's a wee QR code on there that will take you straight on to there you go. I think she's just sharing it. That'll take you onto the young people's section of the website, or of Compass, I think, if you want to kind of sit down and talk through that with your young person. And it'll also link out to the parent section and the professional session. But I will leave it there at 12:31. So thank you all so much for your time, and I really hope that was helpful. Thank you. Bye.